Hello everyone and welcome to our first lecture. And before we start, if you already know what is web scraping and where does Scrapy stand in all of this, feel free to skip this video. But if you are curious and want to know more, please continue watching the rest of it. So web scraping in general is data extraction from websites. Anything you can think of can be extracted from the web. From text, images, videos, emails, anything, I truly mean it. And Scrapy is the framework we use to do web scraping. Now, in contrast to Scrapy, there are other tools written in Python used to do web scraping. For example, we can use the request library with one of the known HTML parsers like Beautiful Soup to extract data from HTML web pages. But these tools can't really stand along with complex projects. They are mainly used to perform simple tasks like scraping a single HTML web page. But when we talk about hundreds and hundreds of web pages, this is really where Scrapy shines. And here it is the benchmarking I did on my PC, which shows that Scrapy is able to scrape 960 pages per minute. This can be different from a PC to another regarding to your CPU performance, how much RAM you have, and your internet speed. If you are curious, I run this on an i3 processor with 8 gigs of RAM. Now I want to talk a little bit about Scrapy's architecture without overwhelming you with unnecessary definitions. And I'm gonna try to be specific as much as I can. So in Scrapy we have 5 main components. I'm gonna list them all and then I'll define each one of them briefly. So we have the spiders component, the pipelines component, the middlewares component, and we have the engine and the scheduler. So the spider component is where we will define what we want to extract from the web page. And in a nutshell, Scrapy has different kinds of spiders. And to be more specific, in Scrapy, it's available to us 5 kinds of spiders defined as Python classes. So we have the Scrapy spider class, the crawl spider class, the XML feed spider for scraping XML files, the CSV feed spider for scraping comma-separated values files, and we have the sitemap spider class to scrape sitemaps. In this course, we'll be using the Scrapy spider class and the crawl spider class. I'm not going to explain what's the difference between them right now, but as you go through the course, you will get the idea. Now, the next component that I want to talk about is the pipelines component. So pipelines are related to the data we extract. For example, if we want to process the data like cleaning it, remove duplication, and storing the data in an external database like we'll do in this course, we definitely have to use pipelines. Now, the following component is the middlewares component, which has everything to do with the request sent to the website and the response we get back from that website. For example, if we want to process a request by injecting custom headers or we want to use proxies, we can do that through a middleware. I know this might sound confusing at the time, but as we go through the course, you will understand more. Now, the 2 last components are the engine and the scheduler. The engine is responsible for coordinating between all the other components. In other words, it will ensure the consistency of all the operations that happen. And finally, the scheduler is responsible for preserving the order of operations. Technically speaking, it's a simple data structure called queue, which follows the FIFO methodology. This sounds confusing, right? So let's understand by an example. So let's imagine that we are going to scrape a website called quoteseveryday.com. This is an imaginary website which has a lot of quotes said by random people. And of course, we want to extract all the available quotes from that website. And let's pretend that you already built the spider that will extract that data and you are now in the stage of launching it. So in a nutshell, when you execute it, what will happen is that this spider you've built will start by sending a request to the engine. And then the engine will transmit that request to the scheduler. Earlier, I told you that the scheduler is a simple data structure that follows the FIFO methodology, which means if there was another request that was sent before this one, it will be served first. But for simplicity reasons, we keep pretend that we do only have one request. Alright, after that the request was gonna be served, will be sent back to the engine. See, now you kind of understand why I said the engine is responsible for coordinating between all the other components. Now what will happen next is the request will be sent to the middleware component, and more specifically to a middleware called the downloader middleware, because that middleware is responsible for getting the response from the target website. So we are not dealing anymore with a request. Instead, we do now have a response ready to be parsed. Again, the response that was generated will be sent to the engine, and from there will be transmitted to the spider through another type of middleware called the spider middleware. So again, We have one type of middleware called the downloader middleware that is responsible for generating the response, and we have the spider middleware that is responsible for extracting data, which is the quotes. After that, the scraped items will be sent to the engine and then to the item pipeline, which will be responsible for processing the items, which are the quotes scraped by the spider middleware. Now, one last thing I want to talk about is that mostly, if not all websites do include in the root directory a file called robots.txt. Robots.txt is used by websites to give instructions to spiders that want to access the website whether they are allowed or not. This file contains three important instructions. The first one is the user agent, and user agent represents the identity of the spider. The second instruction is the allow instruction, which specifies the web pages that the spider is allowed to scrape. And in contrast, we have the disallow instruction, which specifies the web pages that are forbidden. Now, let's take a real-world example. So if you head over to facebook.com/robots.txt, you will get this page. We have the first user agent is set to Applebot. We have Baidu Spider, Bingbot, Googlebot, and so on. So, for example, Googlebot is not allowed to access all the folders and the files listed here. In contrast, if we scroll down, just right here, Googlebot is allowed to scrape the safety check web page and this URL. So this was everything I wanted to teach you in this video. I hope you've enjoyed it, and in the next video, we'll start by setting the development environment.